The rain was pouring when my car broke down in the worst part of town. No umbrella. Dead phone. Then he appeared, offering help with those piercing blue eyes. Little did I know, the kind stranger in the rain was actually the city's most powerful billionaire. Before I tell you how meeting this mysterious stranger changed my entire life, hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you never miss another incredible story like this one. It was one of those days that seemed determined to break me. My boss had dumped a last-minute project on my desk at 4:45, keeping me at the office until well past 8. As I finally headed home, the skies opened up like they'd been holding back all day just to spite me. Rain hammered against my windshield, my wipers barely keeping up as I squinted through the downpour. I was taking a shortcut through the industrial district, a part of town I rarely visited, especially after dark. That's when I heard it. A sputtering cough from my engine, followed by an ominous rattle. No, 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 I muttered, tapping the fuel gauge that had been giving me trouble all week. The car lurched once, twice, then died completely, rolling to a stop beneath a broken streetlight. Perfect. Just perfect. I grabbed my phone to call for help, only to find it completely dead. I'd forgotten to charge it during my hectic day. The rain was coming down in sheets now, and I didn't even have an umbrella. I sat there for a few minutes, forehead pressed against the steering wheel, trying not to cry from sheer frustration. When I finally looked up, I nearly screamed. A tall figure stood beside my car window, rain plastering dark hair to his forehead. I instinctively reached for my pepper spray, heart pounding, but something in his expression made me pause. He gestured for me to roll down the window, just a crack. Car trouble? His voice was deep, with a hint of an accent I couldn't place. I noticed you've been sitting here for a while. It's not safe in this neighborhood after dark. I sized him up quickly. Expensive watch peeking from beneath a surprisingly ordinary raincoat, clean-shaven jaw, and eyes that somehow managed to be both intense and kind. Every warning about strange men and dangerous situations flashed through my mind. But what choice did I have? My phone's dead and I have no idea what's wrong with the car, I admitted reluctantly. I'm not a mechanic, but I can help you get somewhere safe, he offered, rain running down his face. There's a cafe about 2 blocks from here that stays open late. You could call someone from there. I hesitated, still unsure. As if reading my thoughts, he stepped back, giving me space. I completely understand your caution. How about this? I'll walk ahead. You can lock your car and follow at whatever distance feels comfortable. The cafe is just down this street, then left at the corner. Something about his respectful approach put me at ease. This wasn't some creep. This was someone who actually understood a woman's fear in this situation. I nodded, grabbed my purse and braced myself for the downpour. The rain was even worse than it looked, soaking me completely within seconds. The stranger noticed me shivering and offered his coat, which I politely declined. As we walked, he kept a respectful distance, occasionally pointing out puddles or uneven pavement in my path. There was something about him, a quiet confidence, a gentleness that felt genuine. When we finally reached the cafe, a warm, glowing beacon among the shuttered buildings, he held the door, but didn't crowd me. The blast of warmth felt heavenly against my rain-soaked skin. He guided me to a booth in the corner, and something in the way the staff nodded at him suggested he was a regular. "Hot chocolate?" he asked simply. I nodded, still trying to process how I'd ended up here, with him. "2, please, Margaret," he called to the barista, who smiled warmly in return. "I'm Michael, by the way," he said, finally introducing himself as he sat across from me. His smile transformed his face, crinkling the corners of his eyes in a way that made my stomach do an unexpected flip. "Emma," I replied, suddenly very aware of my dripping hair and smudged mascara. "Thank you for this. I don't know what I would have done." "Sometimes we all need a little help in the rain," he said simply, and somehow I knew this night was going to change everything. The hot chocolate arrived in oversized mugs topped with whipped cream and cinnamon, not the instant packet kind, but the rich, real chocolate that coats your throat. Michael insisted on paying, waving away my protests with a casual, "You can get the next one," as if he was certain there would be a next time. As we settled into that corner booth, the awkwardness of our unusual meeting melted away. There's something intimate about sharing a table with a stranger during a rainstorm. The windows steamed up, creating a little bubble that feels separate from the rest of the world. I borrowed the cafe's phone to call my roommate about the car, then found myself in no hurry to leave. "So, what brings you to this part of town?" I asked, curious about this man who seemed so at ease, yet somehow out of place, in the modest cafe. He hesitated just for a second. "I like to walk in the evenings. Clear my head." He skillfully redirected the conversation. "What about you?" "That industrial shortcut isn't on most people's commute." We talked for hours. About books. He loved classics I'd never heard of and listened intently when I gushed about my favorite mystery novels. About travel. Places I dreamed of seeing someday, and cities he described with such vivid detail I felt I'd been there. About work. I shared my frustrations with my graphic design job, while he remained surprisingly vague about his, only mentioning he worked in development. What struck me most was how attentively he listened. In a world where most people wait for their turn to speak, Michael actually heard me. He asked thoughtful follow-up questions about things I'd mentioned earlier, remembered details I barely recalled sharing. Not once did he check a phone or watch while I spoke. "You're not from here originally," I observed, noticing the subtle way he pronounced certain words. "That obvious?" He smiled, a dimple appearing in his left cheek. "I moved here about 8 years ago from London. Couldn't resist the charm of unpredictable weather and questionable coffee." Says the man in a cafe during a thunderstorm, I laughed. "Ah, but I found both good coffee and excellent company, so who's the clever one now?" His eyes held mine for a beat too long, and I felt a flutter of something unfamiliar. The cafe was closing, Margaret apologetically flipping chairs onto tables around us. I hadn't noticed how late it had gotten. Michael pulled out a small notebook and pen from his pocket. "I know this is unconventional, but I'd like to see you again," he said, scribbling something before sliding the paper toward me. "My number. No pressure at all." I hesitated, years of dating disasters making me cautious. But there was something genuine about him that cut through my usual defenses. I took the paper, then impulsively wrote my number on a napkin and handed it to him. "For when you lose mine," I said with more confidence than I felt. The rain had stopped when we stepped outside. Michael insisted on arranging a ride home for me, but didn't invite himself along. Another small gesture that spoke volumes. As I waited for the car, he cleared his throat. "Would you consider having dinner with me tomorrow night? I know a place not far from here." "Not another cafe?" I teased. "Something a bit different," he replied with a mysterious smile. "I'll pick you up at 7. I should have been more cautious. I barely knew this man, but something about him made me feel both excited and completely at ease. "7 works," I replied, surprised by my own boldness. The next evening, I spent an embarrassing amount of time choosing my outfit, settling on a simple black dress that my roommate insisted made me look effortlessly elegant. When the doorbell rang at precisely 7 o'clock, I expected to see Michael standing there with his rain jacket. Instead, I opened the door to find him in a perfectly tailored suit that transformed him from handsome stranger to breathtakingly sophisticated. Behind him idled a sleek black car that even my car-illiterate brain recognized as absurdly expensive. "Too much?" he asked, noticing my wide eyes. "You clean up nice," I managed, suddenly feeling underdressed despite my careful preparation. The restaurant wasn't just exclusive, it was the kind of place with no visible menu prices and staff that seemed to materialize and disappear like elegant ghosts. What was most unnerving was how everyone, from the maître d' to the sommelier, greeted Michael by name, with a deference that went beyond standard customer service. Over candlelight and wine that probably cost more than my monthly rent, I finally asked the question that had been growing since the moment I saw the car. "Michael, who are you exactly?" His smile faltered just slightly. I was rather hoping to postpone that conversation. He took a sip of wine, considering his words carefully. "I'm just someone who was fortunate enough to meet you in the rain." But as the evening progressed, small clues accumulated like breadcrumbs. The way the chef personally visited our table, the subtle nods from other diners, the staff's almost imperceptible deference. By dessert, I was certain of only one thing. The man sitting across from me was not just someone who worked in development. I had no idea how right I was. Over the next 2 weeks, Michael and I fell into a rhythm of increasingly elaborate dates, alternating with simple, intimate moments. One night we'd be at the Symphony, where he somehow had box seats. The next afternoon, just walking through the park sharing ice cream. Each time I tried to pay for anything, he smoothly intervened, always with a different excuse. My roommate Jen was suspicious from the start. You meet a gorgeous man who rescues you in the rain, takes you to 5-star restaurants and doesn't even have social media. Emma, he's either married or hiding something massive. I defended him, but doubts crept in. For someone so attentive to my life, Michael remained remarkably vague about his own. He'd mention meetings or business calls, but changed the subject when I asked for details. His apartment, which I'd only seen once when he cooked dinner, was beautiful, but felt impersonal, like a high-end hotel suite rather than a home. The truth began unraveling on an ordinary Tuesday. I was working at my favorite downtown coffee shop when I glanced at the newspaper someone had left behind. There, on the business page, was Michael's face. The headline read, "Mitchell Development acquires historic Bradford building for $220 million. I nearly choked on my latte. The article described Michael Mitchell as the reclusive CEO of Mitchell Holdings, whose real estate portfolio now encompasses nearly 40% of the downtown commercial district. There was more, about his philanthropic work, his Oxford education, his estimated net worth, that made my eyes water. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael himself. "Dinner tonight? That Italian place you mentioned wanting to try?" I stared at my phone, then back at the newspaper. The Italian place I'd mentioned was a neighborhood gem I loved, nothing fancy. He hadn't mentioned he owned the entire block it sat on. I sent back a simple "sure" and spent the rest of the day in a daze, feelings swirling between betrayal and confusion. Why would someone like him hide who he was? Why pursue me, a graphic designer with student loans and a shared apartment, when he could literally date anyone? That evening, I arrived at the restaurant early, newspaper tucked into my bag. Michael walked in, looking relaxed in jeans and a casual button-up, smiling that smile that usually made my heart skip. Tonight, it just made me sad. "I ordered us that wine you liked," he said, sitting down. "Thanks, Mr. Mitchell," I replied quietly, sliding the newspaper across the table. The color drained from his face as he saw the headline. "Emma, I can explain." 2 weeks, Michael. We've spent almost every day together for 2 weeks. And you never thought to mention you own half the city. That you're some kind of billionaire." "I'm not," he started, then sighed. "The estimates in those articles are exaggerated." "That's what you're focusing on, the exact amount of your wealth." I struggled to keep my voice down. "Did you think I wouldn't find out?" "Of course I knew you'd eventually discover who I am," he said, running a hand through his hair. "I just wanted time." "Time for what?" "Time to be just Michael. Not Michael Mitchell, not the CEO, not the bachelor billionaire the tabloids write about." His eyes met mine, vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen before. "Do you know how rare it is for me to meet someone who treats me like a normal person? Who likes me for just me? But it wasn't really you, was it? I countered. You only showed me pieces. How am I supposed to know which parts were real? The waiter approached with our wine, recognized the tension, and quietly retreated. Everything with you has been real, Michael said softly. That night in the rain, the cafe, I never planned any of it. I was just walking, clearing my head after a difficult board meeting. When I saw you stranded, I was just a man helping a woman in trouble. And afterwards, the expensive restaurants, the theatre tickets. I wanted to impress you, he admitted sheepishly. But I noticed you seemed more comfortable at the cafe at the park. That's why I suggested this place tonight. I took a deep breath, trying to process it all. So you own this building too? He winced slightly. And the next 2 blocks. But that's not why we're here. The chef here makes the best carbonara in the city. You said so yourself. Despite everything, I laughed. The absurdity of the situation hit me all at once. Most people just lie about their age or height on dating profiles, you know. I never technically lied, he offered with a hesitant smile. Development is literally what my company does. I just omitted the scale. A lie of omission is still a lie, Michael. His face grew serious. You're right. I should have told you sooner. I've just been burned before. People who wanted proximity to wealth, not to me. After a while, you start to build walls. The waiter returned, and we ordered mechanically. As he left, Michael reached across the table, not quite touching my hand. Ask me anything. No more vague answers, no more deflections. I want you to know me, the real me, all of it. I studied his face, the same one that had appeared in the rain that night, now filled with a new vulnerability. Why me? With everything and everyone you could have, why pursue this? Because when I'm with you, I'm not thinking about mergers or acquisitions or board approvals. Because you get genuinely excited about the plot twist in that mystery novel and the way the light hits the lake at sunset. Because you treat the cafe waitress and the symphony conductor with the same respect. He paused. Because for the first time in years, I'm just Michael when I'm with you. The food arrived and we ate in contemplative silence. I was still processing, still hurt by the deception, but something else was emerging. Understanding. The man across from me carried a weight I couldn't fully comprehend, a loneliness hidden beneath success. So, where do we go from here? I finally asked. That depends, he said carefully. Can you see past the headlines and bank accounts to the man who helped you in the rain? Because that's who I am, Emma. The rest is just circumstance. I thought about our conversations, his kindness, the way he listened. Had any of that changed because of his wealth? Would I have given him a chance that night if I'd known who he was? Or would I have dismissed him as out of my league? I don't know, I answered honestly, but I'm willing to find out who Michael Mitchell really is, all of him this time. His smile, relieved, genuine, hopeful, told me this was just the beginning of a much more complicated story. Dating Michael Mitchell was nothing like dating regular Michael. That became painfully clear the first time we were photographed together leaving a restaurant. I'd been mid-laugh at something he said when flashes erupted from across the street. Michael instinctively pulled me closer, shielding me with his body as he hurried us to his waiting car. I'm so sorry, he said once we were safely inside. I should have warned you this might happen. The next morning, my phone exploded with notifications. High school acquaintances I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly wanted to catch up. My Instagram followers tripled overnight. Worst of all was the local gossip blog, with its blaring headline, Mitchell's Mystery Woman, Who Is She? The article speculated about everything from my background to whether I'd had cosmetic surgery. This is insane, I told Jen, who was both horrified and fascinated by the whole situation. They're analyzing my outfit as if it's evidence in a crime scene. Welcome to life with a billionaire, she replied, scrolling through comments. Oh, look, they're already calling you a gold digger. I wish I could say I was strong enough to ignore it all, but the whispers followed me everywhere. At work, clients suddenly wanted meetings with that designer dating Michael Mitchell. At my favorite coffee shop, people stared and took surreptitious photos. Even my parents called, having seen an article about us in their local paper. "He seems accomplished," my father said cautiously. "Just be careful, Emma. Men like that are used to getting their way." Michael tried his best to shield me. We switched to private dining rooms, back entrances, weekends away in remote locations. But the more we tried to hide, the more valuable photos of us became. The paparazzi were relentless, and I discovered I hated feeling hunted. "How do you live like this?" I asked him one night as we cancelled plans yet again because someone had leaked our reservation. "You adapt," he said simply, "but I hate that you're going through this because of me." The scrutiny strained us. I became paranoid about my appearance, my words, everything being potential fodder for gossip. Michael grew increasingly protective, sometimes making decisions for both of us without consulting me. Our easy conversations became weighted with unspoken tensions. Then came the Mitchell Foundation Gala, a major annual charity event I couldn't avoid as Michael's girlfriend. He hired stylists and coached me on who everyone was, but nothing prepared me for the reality of walking into a room where everyone already had opinions about me. "Smile," Michael whispered as cameras flashed. "They're watching." I plastered on a fake smile that made my cheeks hurt as we made our way through the crowd. Everyone wanted a piece of Michael's attention. I stood dutifully by his side, feeling increasingly like an accessory rather than a partner. "So you're the graphic designer," one elegantly dressed woman said, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "How creative. Michael has always admired artists." The way she emphasized admired made it clear what she really meant. Throughout the evening, I received countless variations of the same message. I didn't belong in Michael's world. Even worse were the people who were overly nice, treating me like a charity case Michael had generously elevated. Later that night, we had our first real fight. I was exhausted, hurt, and feeling utterly out of place. "Those are your friends?" I demanded, kicking off the painful heels I'd worn all night. "Business associates mostly. Why? Did someone say something to you?" "Everyone said something to me, Michael. Either directly or with those condescending looks. I couldn't hold back the tears of frustration. No one there believes I'm with you for any reason except your money." "That doesn't matter," he insisted, loosening his tie. "I know the truth. It matters to me. I don't want to spend my life being the gold-digging girlfriend of Michael Mitchell." "Then don't," he said suddenly, his voice tight with emotion. "Be Michael Mitchell's wife instead." I stared at him, completely thrown. "Are you proposing? In the middle of a fight?" "Apparently I am." He ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "This isn't how I planned it, but yes. Marry me, Emma. Let me show everyone exactly how serious I am about you." The words should have been romantic, but all I heard was a solution to a problem. His problem. "So I'll go from being your questionable girlfriend to your respectable wife? Is that supposed to fix everything?" "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean? Because it sounds like you're trying to legitimize me in the eyes of your world, instead of figuring out how we fit into each other's lives." For the first time, Michael looked genuinely lost for words. The confident businessman who could handle any crisis was completely unprepared for this moment. "I think I need some space," I said quietly. "Emma, please. Just for a few days. I need to think, away from all of this." I gestured vaguely at his penthouse, at the evidence of his world that still felt foreign to me. I stayed with Jen for a week, ignoring his calls and the increasingly elaborate flower arrangements he sent. The paparazzi camped outside her apartment until she threatened them with a garden hose. My boss graciously allowed me to work remotely after a client asked if I could put in a word with Mitchell Holdings. Away from Michael, I could finally hear myself think. I missed him, not his wealth or the experiences it provided, but him. His dry humor, his focused attention, the way he could read my moods. But I also recognized how quickly I'd been subsumed by his identity, becoming Michael Mitchell's girlfriend, instead of Emma Chen, graphic designer and person in my own right. My mother called during this time, surprisingly insightful for someone who usually avoided difficult conversations. Relationships are always a negotiation, she said, but you need to make sure you're not the only one compromising. After 7 days of separation, I still hadn't found clear answers, but I knew one thing: I couldn't figure this out alone. Whatever future we might have, Michael and I needed to build it together, honestly facing the complications of our different worlds. I texted him simply, "We need to talk." His reply came instantly. Name the place and time. "I'll be there." I chose neutral ground, the same cafe where we'd first really talked that rainy night. It felt like returning to the beginning, before wealth and public scrutiny had complicated everything between us. What I didn't know was that this conversation would either end things between us for good or forge something stronger than either of us could have imagined. I arrived at the cafe 30 minutes early, needing time to gather my thoughts. Margaret greeted me with a warm smile and a knowing look. "He's been in here every day this week, you know, just sitting in your booth staring at his coffee." The image of powerful Michael Mitchell, dejected in our little cafe, made my heart twist. I ordered my usual and settled into our corner booth, watching raindrops race down the window, a fitting parallel to that first night. When Michael walked in, the difference was striking. The polished businessman was gone, replaced by someone who looked like he hadn't slept in days. Hair slightly disheveled, stubble on his jaw, wearing just jeans and a sweater. He looked more like the man who'd helped me in the rain than the billionaire from the tabloids. "Hi," he said simply, sliding into the booth. "Hi," I echoed, suddenly unsure where to begin. We both started speaking at once, then laughed awkwardly. "You first," I offered. Michael took a deep breath. "I've missed you, not just this past week, but for longer. Somewhere between all the galas and business meetings and hiding from photographers, I started missing the real moments between us." "I've missed you too," I admitted. "I've been thinking about what you said, about legitimizing you in my world instead of figuring out how we fit together." His fingers traced patterns on the tabletop. "You were right. I was trying to solve a problem instead of addressing what matters." Outside, the rain intensified, creating a cocoon of white noise around us. "The thing is, Emma, I don't want to go back to my old life without you in it, but I also don't want you to feel like you have to fit into some predefined role in my world." "What do you want then?" I asked quietly. "I want us to build something new, together." His eyes met mine, vulnerable and sincere. "Not my world or your world, but our world." He reached into his pocket and placed a small object on the table between us. It wasn't a ring box, as I'd half feared, but a key. "What's this?" I asked. "It's a key to a cabin about 2 hours from here. Nothing fancy, just a simple place by the lake. No one knows I own it. Not my business associates, not the press. It's the one place I've always felt like just me." I picked up the key, feeling its weight. "I'm not asking you to marry me, at least not yet," he continued. "I'm asking for a chance to find balance together. Weekends at the cabin, away from scrutiny, boundaries around my work life, no more hiding you or pushing you into uncomfortable situations, and most importantly, supporting your career and independence." "That all sounds good in theory," I said carefully. "But what happens when real life gets in the way? When the next big business deal demands your attention or another photographer catches us?" "Then we figure it out together. I've already started making changes." He pulled out his phone, showing me an email. "I've restructured my executive team to reduce my day-to-day responsibilities, and I've spoken to my legal team about privacy protections for you." "You did that during our week apart?" I did a lot of thinking too, he said with a small smile. About what really matters. I built this company thinking success would bring fulfillment, but it wasn't until I met you that I realized what I was missing. I turned the key over in my hand, feeling its potential. I can't pretend your wealth and status don't complicate things. They do, and they probably always will. I know. And I can't pretend to be just an ordinary guy anymore. But I think maybe we can find a middle ground. Margaret appeared with fresh coffee, giving us a moment to collect our thoughts. I don't have all the answers, Michael continued once she'd left, but I know that walking away from us would be the biggest mistake of my life. I don't care about being Michael Mitchell's CEO, nearly as much as I care about being the man who gets to make you laugh. The sincerity in his voice touched something deep within me. Here was a man who could have anything in the world, humbling himself in a cafe booth, asking not for forgiveness, but for partnership. I've been doing some thinking too, I finally said, about what I need to feel secure in this relationship. He leaned forward, giving me his complete attention, that same focus that had drawn me to him from the beginning. I need my own career, my own friends, my own identity outside of your world. I need you to respect when I say something is too much, and I need honesty, even when it's complicated. All of those things? Yes, he nodded emphatically. Anything else? I need to know that the man I fell for, the one who helped me in the rain and talked about books for hours, is the real you, not some persona you created to seem normal. He's the most real part of me, Michael said softly, the part I thought I'd lost until I met you. Rain continued to drum against the windows as something shifted between us. A new understanding, a foundation stronger than before. So where do we go from here? He asked. I held up the key. Maybe we start with a weekend at this cabin. No expectations, no pressure, just us figuring out what our world looks like. His smile, that genuine, warm smile that had nothing to do with business deals or social status, spread across his face. I'd like that. We spent hours in that cafe, talking more openly than we ever had before, about his childhood in a wealthy but emotionally distant family, about my fears of losing myself in his shadow, about the practical realities of dating someone in the public eye. No easy solutions, but a shared commitment to facing them together. That weekend at the cabin became our blueprint for moving forward. Simple, authentic moments away from scrutiny. Michael chopping wood for the fireplace. Me teaching him to make my grandmother's dumplings. Conversations that stretched long into the night. Back in the city, we established new patterns. I kept my apartment, maintained my separate friend group, and continued building my career. Michael restructured his schedule to create space for what mattered. When we attended public events, we did so as equal partners, with boundaries we'd established together. The press still followed us, but their interest waned when they realized we weren't giving them drama to feed on. Some still called me a gold digger. Others created elaborate romantic narratives about our relationship. We learned to laugh at both. 6 months after our cafe reconciliation, Michael suggested we turn a floor of his building into affordable studios for local artists. I helped design the space and now run workshops there on weekends. It's become our shared project, a tangible representation of our worlds merging. It hasn't been perfect. We still argue about his workaholic tendencies and my stubborn independence. His mother still makes subtle comments about my interesting career choice. Photographers still occasionally jump out of bushes. But every time it rains, we have a tradition. No matter how busy we are, we meet at that little cafe. We sit in our booth, order hot chocolate, and remember how it all began, with a broken-down car, a helping hand, and 2 people who saw past appearances to something real. Life doesn't follow a fairy tale script. Sometimes the handsome stranger really does own half the city, but that doesn't make the connection any less genuine. Sometimes the greatest journey isn't about being rescued by a billionaire, but about 2 people. one who happened to have wealth and one who happened to have a broken-down car, discovering that what they really needed was simply each other. I still don't know what the future holds for us, but I've learned that life's most meaningful turning points often happen when you least expect them, even on a rainy night when everything seems to be going wrong. Sometimes, breaking down is just the beginning of finding your way home. From a broken-down car in the rain to finding unexpected love with someone I never would have crossed paths with otherwise. Life really can change in an instant. If you enjoyed my story, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a comment about your own unexpected life-changing moment. Don't forget to subscribe for more real stories that prove truth is stranger than fiction.